Good day to you. Welcome to another episode of the Fighting Men of Rhodesia YouTube series. I'm Tony Ballinger, and my guest today is Bryan Kriel from the Air Force. He was an LAC, which I believe is one rank above Aircraftsman. We were discussing it off air. He can't remember, 50-year brain, and me too. I didn't really have anything to do with the Air Force chaps. So welcome to you, Bryan. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Tony. I'd just like to start by thanking yourself, John and Hannes, for all the amazing work you've done. I've learned so much about the history of Rhodesia, the fighting men of Rhodesia, which I suppose we're all caught up in our little bubbles and did what we had to do. And I personally wasn't aware of a lot of what went on. So it's been very educational for me. So thanks again.
Yeah, I'm sure the audience can hear that you picked up an Aussie twang because you're now living in Brisbane, way north of Sydney in Australia in the hot, sweaty belt. And because of the time difference, I'm sitting in frigid England at 10 o'clock at night, and you can see why I'm dressed up like an Eskimo. I'm starting to look more like my Viking roots every day living over here.
Yeah.
Beard. So tell us the usual background story, Bryan, of where you were born and how you ended up in the Defence Forces.
Yeah. Just before I start on that, I'd just like to personally pay homage to all the mums and wives and girlfriends and the companies that kept Rhodesia going in, such difficult circumstances. You got to imagine like businesses trying to keep going when, people on call-ups or, for 6 weeks at a time. So it must be extremely difficult. But anyway, moving on. I was born in Fort Victoria, and my parents had moved from South Africa. My dad was in the sort of carpentry side of things, and my mum worked in finance. After that, we'd moved to Bulawayo, so I went to Hillside Junior School and ended up at Hamilton High School. I'll mention on a bit later, but I actually went to school with Bryan Gordon, who was the one Squadron pilot. About then, around I think it was the late 1960s, my dad decided to join the BSAP Police Pioneers. That was one of the photos I sent of my dad in the uniform. So he would pretty much go away for a month at a time on a Isuzu, I think it was a 7-ton truck, which wasn't mine protected. So he would travel around to like Thule, Villa Kazangula, Kariba, all over. And it always amazed me that, back those days, there was no phones or anything, and he'd travel around and, to go away for a month at a time into very remote areas, just with a few of his African workers. And the only form of protection he had was, I think it was a 9mm Uzi, is that correct?
Yeah, chief.
And I think it had a fold-out butt from memory. And, so he'd just say to my mum, expect me when you see me sort of thing. And quite often he'd arrive home at night, like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and we'd all get up and help him unload and that. So
Did you say that was in the police, Bryan?
Yeah, Police Pioneers.
Oh wow! What was he doing? What was his role?
Yeah, so he'd go around building police stations, like as I said, or repairing police stations, and he met a lot of people, and he loved that kind of life. He actually became very good friends with. He's been spoken about Willem de Beer, the game ranger, was attacked by lions and that, and I've got a few stories about that with him too, but I don't know if we'll go there. We'll have time to, but and as a kid, during school holidays, sometimes I'd go with him in the police Land Rover or somewhere to places like Thule, which was what's on the Botswana border, Thule Hunting Circle, I think they called it. I can remember, I think I was only about 16, and we were going down this dirt track, and I said to my dad, there was like a V in the road, and I said to my dad, how do you know which track to go down, Dad? He said, oh, you just take the more worn one. Anyway, the closest he came to any contact or anything, I think the truck behind him was blown up. But so God really looked after him, that's for sure. Yeah, so then also around that time, there's also some photos I've sent. My uncle Headley Henchy became one of Ian Smith's bodyguards. So he's the blonde guy baldy blonde going bald. So we were pretty proud of him. We thought, well, that's such an honor, I would have thought. Like Ian Smith was so well respected. And yeah, actually he passed not so long ago, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and his wife Jane's still alive, and she I sent a message because they still live in South Africa. Did Uncle Hedley ever say anything, about like his role in that? And she said no, he never said anything. All he ever said was Ian Smith and his wife were lovely people. So, yeah. And then after that, I think he joined the special branch. So, so that was sort of I think early 70s, late 60s. So, my parents then decided to move out to Glenville. So this is just a bit more about my childhood, which was north of Bulawayo. And my dad was away at the time, and we were living on, I think it was about a 5-acre plot. And my one rainy night, the lady next door to us got murdered. Sister Cross was her name. So obviously that put the wind up my parents, and because my mum obviously was without my dad there. And they decided that we should move to our friend's farm out at Namanjlovu, which was further north of Bulawayo. So that was a lovely time of my life as a kid living on a farm. But unfortunately, the owner of the farm, sorry, this is just a bit about my childhood, was going progressively blind. So I can remember as a kid in the Peugeot 404 Bucky, I'd sit shotgun and we'd drive into town, and I'd have to tell him on the strip roads, a bicycle on the left, car coming, so he'd know which way to drive and which way to. I'd even have to tell him what colour the traffic lights were. So we didn't think anything of it in those days. So mainly farm. It was dairy, eggs, and pigs. So that was a nice time. And then my dad actually got the nickname. I don't know if you ever got a nickname, but the natives there called him. Excuse the accent, but bust my point. And he used to love hunting, and that was one of his passions in life. And he'd had a Bruno 3006, or he had many rifles, but that was his favorite. And to this day, I cannot believe he just never, ever missed, never had to lean against a tree, or even if the kudu was running. So that's how he got the nickname, Bust My Point. And because Uncle Harold, as I called him, was progressively going blind, one of the native lovely guys, his name was actually Fata. And they decided that he should get his license. So I think it took him 7 goes later and he managed to get his license. So then he took the role of doing the delivery runs and supply runs and that. And then about 1976 was my last year of schooling. I'd actually stayed for M levels, and I applied to join the Air Force. I thought, well, I'm not too academically gifted, so I wanted to do an apprenticeship, and I think the call-ups at that time were 2 years. Anyway, I hadn't heard back, so I was intake 156 into Llewellyn Barracks, and that was a bit of a shock to the system. And rather than go through all the normal stuff what people had experienced there was a few things that might be of note. I was lucky enough, I think there was 5 barrack rooms at Llewellyn where we were at any rate, and it was A, B, C, D, and E, and I was lucky enough to be in the last barrack room, and it wasn't full, so we were like living in the Holiday Inn. We had a bed to sleep on because only half the barrack room was full. So, and I remember one night we were doing shine parades, and there was this Corporal Holzhausen, I think, if I remember his name correctly, and the lights were on and the windows open. Anyway, all I knew from, older mates and that in the army, when you're standing to attention, you do not move your eyes. And remember, they'd come past, and if you moved your eyes, do you love me? If you said no, you're in trouble, and if you said yes, you're also in trouble. So anyway, this insect decided to land in my mess, and he starts screaming at me, "What's that?" I'm thinking, oh, I'm not moving. I've been told you to stand still. Anyway, he's doing his nut at me. And anyway, I thought, well, this isn't going to end well. So I decided I better have a look. And we had to shout. We weren't allowed to talk. "It's a bug, Corporal." And he's going, "Well, what's it doing there?" "It's sitting there, Corporal." So needless to say, we got extra shine parades because of that. And yeah, and I just remember being so tired, like so sleep deprived, and I think it was, I stand corrected, but it might have been one of the biggest intakes. And yeah, I just even remembered lunch, just sitting down and trying to have a sleep. And
what intake was that, Bryan?
156.
156. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it was a big one. I think that was the double intake.
Yeah. And I even remember in the lectures, like when you're learning all the, the procedures and that in the bush, and I just couldn't even hear what he was saying. I was just trying to keep my eyes open, because if you saw you going to sleep, you'd be in big trouble. So, and then it was tough at the time, but like listening to some of the stories that's been on some of your episodes, I think it was a walk in the park. And anyway, later on, I think I was about 2 or 3 weeks into first phase at Llewellyn. I got a message that I'd been accepted into the Air Force. So passed. I think we had to do an aptitude test. So I went to the corporal and said, excuse me, Corporal, I've been accepted as a regular into the Air Force, and expecting him to say, well, you can head off for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And he said, no, you're staying here. So I think they let me out on the Friday before, and hopped on a train on the Sunday. And they picked us up and we're off to New Serum. So I thought, I'll be in a blue job. This is going to be a breeze. So it's pretty much 2 first phases on the trot, but I was a little bit mistaken there. So the physical aspect of it was fairly similar, but one of the advantages was I'd actually learned the drill and, a few of the procedures, so I didn't have to concentrate too hard. But I think one of the best things I learned was you always have the last bed in the barrack room. So I don't know if you used to have to line up with pieces of string from one end of the barrack room to the other?
Yeah, I was only at Llewellyn for 3 days, then I went to Gwella and Osby's, but we had to line up everything pretty meticulously. And my story with the insects was that it landed in a net. In fact, I think it was put there by the instructor as you weren't allowed to, and all hell. And what that insect did to us, that the holes that we had to dig and the soil we had to move, and then we had to bury it in a box and give it a formal burial. Then the guy said, I don't know which way it was facing when we buried it. We had to dig it all out again, and it was just crap.
Yeah. Anyway, the advantage was that everybody lined up to you. Remember your boots and your trunk and your bed, and then what was it? A green government service towel. Didn't have a blue diamond on. You had to line it all. Your jocks, you had to fold up like a matchbox or like a cigarette box,
and the pillows. Remember the pillows? Were your pillows very square?
Oh, we had to make bed packs.
Yeah.
Like a blanket that went around in a square. Then I think it had a strip of sheet, a strip of blanket, a strip of sheet, and then the blanket. And
we had to get some old fruit boxes that the African guys out the back passed through the window, and we got the wood off that, and that was our front face for the pillow.
Yeah.
It had to be absolutely square. It was ridiculous,
And then so one of the best advantages was we had Flight Sergeant van der Walt, and he had I believe he was ex-RLI, and he was a pretty mean-looking character. And he'd always he'd go like anti-clockwise around the barrack room, and he'd always come to my bed last, and he'd be telling people like to throw their beds over or throw their bed pack out the window, and he'd come to me, throw your bed over, and it was like I was in like a sort of just a little bit of an alcove, and I'd bend down to throw my bed over, and I'd just be praying, please God, help him to keep walking, and invariably he did, and I'd just put my bed down, because like that was so much work to get your bed back in order. And then I remember the funniest thing one night, we had, I won't mention his name, but there was 2 incidents with him. He's Flight Sergeant van der Walt tells him to throw his bed pack out the window, and he's not happy. And it's like the worst bed pack you've ever seen. Anyway, he's gingerly trying to edge the bed pack, and he's thinking, well, if it has a land square, he's going to be able to put it back on. But that was so funny. Yeah. And then I think it was about 10 o'clock that night, we were continually having the shine parades, and we had to actually get changed into, I think, a combat kit. I can't remember. Anyway, he's standing there with one boot on. Anyway, one of our spotters had seen Flight Sergeant van der Walt coming, and all I knew was when they come for inspection, no matter what, you've got to be standing to attention. I was telling this guy, mate, don't worry about it, just stand to attention. So he's standing there a bit lopsided. And anyway, van der Walt just walked into the door, and he said, right, you guys are right. And he went to the next barrack room, and they were still running around like chooks with their heads cut off. And I think they got revved at 4 that morning. But so where did I get up to? Oh, yeah. The worst part about it was the the senior courses I don't know if they had a roster or something, but they'd go to the pub and then they'd come every night and they'd rev us and rev us and rev us. And the one night there was a huge like a stormwater drain around part of the tech area at New Sarum, and they decided to pour a whole lot of old black engine oil in there. And needless to say, it was Thursday night and it was CO's inspection the next morning. So we had to leopard crawl through all this black engine oil. Yeah, so we didn't get any sleep that night. Anyway, so we'll get back more into the
what had you actually entered the Air Force to be? What was your plan? To be a pilot?
Yeah.
Be technical?
Yeah, just in the tech. So engine airframes.
Right.
So I had a sort of a natural sort of gifting, maybe because of my farm experience and that kind of stuff for engines. And that my dad had bought me a little motorbike I used to bomb around on and working, like helping out as a kid, like with all mechanical stuff. So, yeah. And then it was off to ground training school, GTS we used to call it. And I had my gas turbine instructor was Mike Parker, who's talked on one of your episodes. Yeah, he was a lovely guy, very, very knowledgeable. And then we had a civilian instructor, Sid Watson, who taught us the piston engines. So that was off to sort of after first phase to start learning all the theory. And I think it was about that time you can actually Google this is a bit out of sort of sync, but you can actually Google one of the guys in my course. I won't mention his name, but at the end of the war, just after he stole the Lynx and flew to South Africa. But prior to that, he decided he'd had enough. And I think it was maybe during our first phase or just after. So he thought it was a good idea that he walked up to the tech area and he tried to steal, I believe it was the Cessna 421, which is a twin engine aircraft. So they actually stopped him the guards stopped him at the gate, but for some reason, I don't know what transpired after that, but he seemed to get away with it. But then sort of just jumping right back to, I think it was 81, you can actually Google Aircraftman steals aircraft, but I won't mention his name. But I'd actually left the Air Force then, and I think I was working at RUAC, and he decided that because you could just go up to the tech area, ring Shell or BP or whatever it was, they'd come fuel up the aircraft. So obviously it was Thornhill. I think we used to knock off at, I don't know if it was 1 or 2 o'clock, so we'd start early and we'd have the afternoon off. So I went in the afternoon and filled it up and obviously had all his kit in and it took off. And that part of it I know to be true, but the rest of it, those other parts here say that apparently the CO was in his office and the hard stand at Thornhill was like a half moon shape. And he saw this Lynx taken off and he thought, well, there's no fly in the Sava and it didn't look like the best takeoff. So he phoned Air Movements and said, was there any flights this afternoon? And they said no. So they put 2 and 2 together. But he actually followed the roads and flew to South Africa and got away with it. So
what was he just trying to get out of the forces, was he?
Yeah, I don't know. He was, as I said, well, he had a history. My brother-in-law, Colin Van Furen, who's also engines in the same course as me, he met up with him in South Africa. I think he was working for, I forget now, Comair, I think. And he met up with a guy, and apparently then he stole another airplane and crashed it.
So your training course was at Guerry or Thornhill, all of Thornhill? I mean,
no,
up in Salisbury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did, you know, every I think it was every Friday we'd have exams. So get up like 4 a.m. and do a lot of study on that. And one thing we had to do, we'd go to the metal. There was like a metalwork area, and we had to file this cube of metal, and it had to be exactly 25 by 25 by 25. So for every 0.1 of a mil you were out, you lost 5%, I think it was, and for every minute of a degree, you lost 5%. So it took us a week, but I think we all passed. And then from there, it was off to go to the squadrons. So you can imagine, like, you've got a bit of theory, but you're still a bit green behind the ears. You know, the practical's a whole lot different. So I went off to...
What type of theory would they have taught you in that early phase? Was it just to see whether you had a feeling for it? Were they actually teaching you airflows or how a carburetor works? I mean, I don't know if planes have carburetors. What were the very basic things they taught you right at the outset?
Yeah, well, basically it was I did engines and airframe, so it was the theory behind how a gas turbine engine worked. I don't know if you want me to just give you a brief overview of just the simplistic view of how
Yeah,
a gas.
yeah, sure.
So pretty much you've got a gas turbine engine. I actually ended up on one squadron, so we sort of. Do you mind if I just come back to that part, or?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
All right. Otherwise, I'll lose track of what I want to say. So my first experience in like the real world was on 3 Squadron, which was the Dakotas. And just a few incidents there. I remember a DAC came back with 13 bullet holes in it. And I remember 12 of the bullet holes were towards the rear of the aircraft, and then there was only one up the front. And I had to go somewhere. They never even used to tell us where we were going. We were just told we're going, and to do some maintenance or supply run, I can't remember. And I thought, oh, well, best I sit up the front. There was only one bullet hole up the front. And I remember landing on this little airstrip, and we loaded up, and it was time to come home. And I just remember the one pilot saying to the other pilot, they were a bit concerned we weren't going to make it. We were pretty heavy. Anyway, I just remember, I don't know if you remember the growl in those DAC engines when they used to rev them up before they take off. I'll never forget that. And yeah, we were just bouncing down the runway, and these trees are coming up, and yeah, they pulled up, and luckily we made it. And there was a flight sergeant, Pete Benniker. He had a thing about wire locking. So every nut or bolt on an aircraft has to have some form of locking, and fairly common locking was a wire locking. And there was rules you had to adhere to. So there had to be a certain amount of twists per inches and certain angles and everything. And as an apprentice, you weren't allowed to use wire locking pliers. So I just remember I'll go to him, excuse me, flight, I've done the wire locking, and he'd walk up and with his sidecar, cut, and I'd try again, cut. And needless to say, it was the most awkward wire locking you could imagine. Couldn't hardly get your hands in there. And I thought, I had this big pile of wire behind me, and I thought, I don't know if I'm ever going to get this right. But it took me many, it must have been about 30 years later, I realized, what had he taught me? He taught me, pride and perseverance and patience and the skill to do the job, plus a big lesson in life. And then it was off to 5 Squadron, which was the Canberras, and we used to have to help the armourers out, loading up those bouncing bombs. I think they were red from memory. And I also remember seeing, I think in one of the episodes, it showed the Canberra with I think it's Sam had gone up the jet pipe. There's a fair bit of damage there. Anyway, I remember the one night we only just started at 5 Squadron, and we were told we had to help the armourers load up the Canberra with these bouncing bombs, and we'd loaded it all up. I think it was around 10ish that night. For some reason, we were never told, but I don't know if the information was leaked out, but we had to unload. Anyway, I think I was driving a forklift, and there's a guy behind me with a tractor, and the main lights in the hangar weren't on. It was just the side lights, and we were just packing up to get going. And the guy behind me said, "Oh, Bryan, can you move forward a little bit more? I'm not going to be able to close the hangar doors." I just inched forward, and as I said, I couldn't see, and the top of the forklift hit the tip tank of the Canberra and put a big hole in it. And I thought, oh man, I'm off the deep my life. I went to see, I forget his name now, the warrant officer, and explained to him what happened. He was a lovely guy, and we stayed back that night, swapped it over. Anyway, the next day they got the guys from NDS, which non-destructive crack testing, and because if you crack the main spar of the Canberra, that's the end of it. And anyway, I'm pacing up and down behind the Canberra, and they're doing I think it was ultrasonics through the main spar, and they can see something there. And I thought, oh, great. Anyway, they go to the other side wing, and no, they can't see anything. Come back. Oh, anyway, luckily they decided, oh, let's go check another Canberra, and they found this exact same thing they were looking at. So I don't know what they found, but it must have been some molding or something they actually never noticed prior. And then it was off to ASF, which was Aircraft Service Field, and I had to help salvage a LO-7 that, it was just a total write-off. So that was pretty sad. Yeah.
Going back to the Canberras, there was great fear that the wings had suffered sort of permanent fatigue and they were ready to fall off. I remember in the raid into Zambia, what was it called again? The main one. I've actually got a voice recording of where one of the pilots is saying, "I hope those bloody wings don't fall off," because this persistent worry, the Green Leader strike. There was this persistent worry of the wings falling off. Did that sort of circulate amongst you guys?
No, there was all I ever knew was that, you know, if you crack the main spar, that the aircraft was written off. But there was, down by the bomb dump, we used to have these towers around the Air Force, Gorma 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we used to have to guard the perimeters, and down by Gorma 5, we used to call it. It was the graveyard, and there was, you know, a few cameras from memory and different aircraft sort of sitting down there. But yeah, I was a bit sort of part of, you could still see part of the guy's kit who was in the aircraft in the Alouette crash. So it sort of was a very bit sad, you know. And one of the things we also had to do, I wasn't at ASF very long. You'd have to do the tracking of the main rotor blade. So you'd have this long, like pole with like a little rubber flag on the end, and you'd put different color wax, I think it was, on the tip of each blade. And then as the pilot had the blade, the main rotors going, you'd have to gingerly walk forward, and which was quite difficult because, you know, a little bit of movement, yeah, there's a lot there. And then they could tell by the colors of the wax on the little like rubber flag part or whatever it was made of, if they were in you know, needed adjusting. And I think that was one of them we named Guppy or something like that. It had been sunk, and I went on the test flight. Did you ever go in the auto rotation or?
No, I watched it at Wanky, but I was too chicken to go in one of those.
Yeah, then they don't tell you all of a sudden. It's just so the theory behind that is if the engine fails, they can drop their collective and get the main rotors, you know, RPM increasing. That's my understanding anyway, and then pull up on it. And yeah, apparently you can land safely. And then my favorite part of New Sheringham was ERS. So I forget who's talked from ERS, Palmer, I think, or I can't remember. You know, I worked with Sergeant Mack and Corporal Doug Washington, and just the loveliest guys. And in particular, Sergeant Mack, he was a true perfectionist. There's a photo which I've sent of, I wasn't in that photo, but where there's a whole group of guys, they were from ERS. So I think when that photo was taken, I was posted to one squadron. So we'll go back to what you asked about the theory, a little bit of how a gas turbine engine works. You've got on an Avon 207, which was the Hunter engine, there's, from memory now, there's 15 stages of rotor blades. So each of the blades would vary in size, I think from about that big to smaller. And they actually look shaped like a little wing. So each of the compressor blades now is a divergent duct. So the theory is when the air comes through, the pressure increases. So you've got a stator blade, rotor blade stator, all the way through to 15 stages. So that's like your compression stroke of like a conventional engine. And then at the end of the 15th stage, obviously you've got a whole lot of pressure. So that's where you start putting the fuel in. And then there's this big igniter, it's massive, like a spark plug. But once that fuel's lit, that's it. You got, and then that's like your combustion. And obviously when you burn in fuel, it accelerates the velocity. And it's then actually that's in the combustion chamber engine, part of the engine, which is there's these like combustion chambers, I forget how many were around, which were made of pneumatic alloy, which had a very high melting point. And around each of the little combustion chambers, maybe from memory the size of your fingernail, there was these little ducts which they poured air through to try and keep the heat off the alloy. So then you're getting a very high increase in velocity of the gas going through there. And it then goes to the turbine. From memory, I think there was 2 turbine blades and 2 stator blades in the turbine, and they were all now the opposite direction, concave. So the theory is that increases the velocity. So when what makes the plane go is the difference of the speed. That's your thrust. I think 7,000 something PSI. I think I got a photo of it there somewhere. Sorry, my memory's fading. But yeah, the difference of the speed between the aircraft, or the air coming in to going out. And yeah, so as an apprentice, we would have to vapor blast, which is a similar sort of thing to a sandblast, which would stress relieve the blades. And yeah, that would take days. And then you'd have to individually weigh each blade after you'd crack tested them. and then you'd lay them in these big like discs in a certain sequence, and then once they were in there, we'd go with Warrant Officer Bob Mackey, I think his name was. Lovely guy, pretty quiet guy, but yeah, I was just mind boggled with what he knew. So we'd go off in a little Willys Jeep across the air rod. They had like a dynamic balancer, and balance. So that's like balancing it first a static balance, then like rotate, like similar to balancing a wheel, I suppose, on a car. And then we'd bring it back and start putting the engine together. So from memory, I think there was in my team 3 of us, and I think there was 3 teams of 3. I forget the other guys' names. And I think it took, as I said, 3 months to overhaul an engine. And then after you put it all together, you'd take it down to near the bomb dump. There was a test bed area, and unfortunately, we had a bit of a problem there. We were ground running this engine, and you had these 2 steel cables that sort of held the engine towards the intake, and these big like there was like a red steel mesh which stopped any foreign bodies going in the intake. But unfortunately, one of the engines we were ground running before we sent to Thornhill, there was these like turnbuckles which were mechanically bolted to the inside of the intake. It sheared, and the part of it went through the engine. So that was the end of that engine. Anyway, as idiots, we used to, I don't know if anyone else did, but Doug and I used to, you'd go to, when the Sarge was in the control room and he had it at flat, which I think was 7,800 RPM, we used to grab a brick and stand next to the jet pipe, and if you just like lobbed it, the brick would just fall off. So you actually had to hoik it into there. And to me, it appeared like, it looked like a cartoon. You just see this brick like appeared to like distort. And there was a concrete wall, I don't know, 20, 30 meters away at 45 degrees. And the next minute you'd see you'd just see it leave, but you wouldn't see it go there. And then you'd just see it coming down in pieces. So, so that was pretty sad that that engine got ruined after all that work. But
I think I interviewed one guy in your same sort of role. I think he said that those blades were actually made in Rhodesia, the ones that needed to be replaced, which is an incredibly specialized role.
Yeah. I personally wasn't aware of that, but I stand corrected. I wasn't, as I said, I was only an apprentice first year, just trying to spike all the information you can and learn. Like there was a lot of pressure. You think, trying to learning the theory is one thing, and then which you had time to study, but being in the real world was a little bit different. And then so that's I think a bit of the stories of New Serum. I was then posted to Thornhill to 1 Squadron. I don't know how I snagged that, but as I said, I grew up in Bulawayo, so my girlfriend or fiance at that time was living in Bulawayo, so that was great for me. Like, I don't know, you guys used to move around, but we always used to have to hitchhike, and hitchhiking from Salisbury to Bulawayo. I forget what time we used to leave, 4 or 5 o'clock on Friday arvo. The chances of getting to Bulawayo weren't too high, so we'd always travel like in your camo and with an FN. People would pick you up, and met a lot of lovely people, like hitchhiking, and a few funny things there. If you got stuck in Hartley, what was it, Gatumo, where you'd be thinking, well, you're either sleeping on the side of the road or you're gonna try and jump the train. And I remember this one night with Gordon McLean. He was an armourer. Actually, I went to school with him, lovely guy, and I forget where we stopped. It must have been Gatumo or someone. It's getting late, and we always knew when the trains were coming through, so we'd run, and when the train stopped, jump on the train, and the guard used to catch you, and he, where's your ticket? Oh no, sorry, we haven't got tickets. And well, you're going to have to pay. Oh no, sorry, we haven't got any money. Oh, get off the train. And because remember those days, I think I sent a photo of the units, the petrol coupons, 1 gallon to like they were scarce. So to get home, you didn't have too many choices. So,
this might be something interesting for our foreign viewers who may not know this, but the whole country was on petrol rationing during a part of the war. I think South Africa put a bit of pressure on us with fuel supplies to edge us towards negotiations. And I, fortunately, after I left the army, I was at Police Morris Depot, and on every Friday afternoon they brought in a huge sheet of petrol coupons. And there were only about 8 of us there, so we walked out with about 20 each, which I
Wow.
4 to my mom and dad, 5 to my brother, and a couple to my mates. And so we were never without fuel. But the average person had about, it was a ridiculous amount. I think it was about 2 gallons of petrol a week or something. It was
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah, they gave you just enough to get to work and back.
Yeah,
So each coupon, I think, was worth a gallon.
yeah, that's right.
And anyway, the train pulled out, and Gordon and I were thinking, no, we're not hanging around. We'll take our chances. So we saw the guard walked off, so like down the passageway. So we jump on, and old Gordon, I don't know what he used, I don't know, his knife or something, and they had those little bedding compartments. Anyway, opens the door and he says, "Hey, Bryan, yeah," and they had those rolls of sheet and blanket and everything. Now, bearing in mind, you hadn't slept in the bed for me for 12 weeks, man. And all I can remember is laying out this bed on those bunks with the sheets, and a pillow. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. Yeah. So, and then we used to jump off at Cement, which was just outside of Bulawayo, and you'd jump off the train, you slow down, and you could hitchhike and beat the train into town. So, yeah. And then one day, this guy, he picks me up in a Peugeot 504, and I think he picked me up in Guello. And he's yawning his head off. And, "Oh, you're really tired, mate." He says, "Oh, mate, I'm so tired. Had a really big night." And he just keeps yawning. And I said, "Oh, excuse me, would you like me to drive?" "Oh, would you please?" "Oh, thank you." He's eternally grateful for that. And anyway, he pulled over. We swapped over. And Bulawayo to Guello to Bulawayo is 2 hours. Anyway, 2 minutes later, he's fast asleep. I don't know what he thought of his fuel gauge when he woke up, but I did it in an hour. Yeah.
Was there
Anyway,
much nightlife in Bulawayo? I grew up in Salisbury and went home from my trips in the bush to relatively good nightlife. Lots of nightclubs and restaurants. What was it like in Bulawayo?
yeah, I didn't really get involved with that. I knew there was this place called the Circus, or they nicknamed the Zoo. I had a friend who used to go there all the time, but because I was sort of pretty much straight from school, right, the army, and then straight into the Air Force. So
probably was the zoo.
Yeah. That's, you used to say that's where all the animals hang out. And and then so obviously into one squadron, there was Warrant Officer Trikoshi. He was a Greek guy, lovely guy. He was really funny, and you could tease him. Costa Trikoshi was his name. And then there was Rake, I forget his surname. I think he was a flight sergeant. And then Neil Wagner, he was sergeant. And then there was this, I think it was a corporal. I forget his name, but we used to call him Bones. He was a very slim kind of guy. So the advantage of having him on the squadron was it was a lot easier for him to crawl down the intakes to check. There were certain checks you had to do. So we could, I don't know, I think some of the guys would have struggled, but yeah, it was pretty difficult to get in and out of there. But I remember walking through the hangar the one day, and if there was a good, if they'd done a good raid, the pilots would do a beat up over the hangar. And I remember, man, they come through the speed of sound over the hangar, and I'd hate to be, that was enough to frighten the living daylights out of you. The whole hangar just shook, and that gave us a big fright. And then we predominantly just did like pre-flights, turnarounds and after flights. So just fuel up the aircraft, check for damage, check all the oils and everything. And also part of the role was you'd have to climb up that red ladder and strap the pilot in. So as I said, I actually went to school with Bryan Gordon. So that's been in a way lovely. I've made contact with his sister. They actually used to just live around the corner from me, in Malindile in Bulawayo.
Mm-hmm.
His dad's 90 years old, 90 something. Last I heard, I spoke to Shirley maybe a month or two ago. So, and then I think Ziggy also gave a talk about. I don't know if you can answer, Tony, but I was listening to what was his name?
No problem, John. We'll just
Lieutenant Barry Stranick, I think.
Yeah.
He did a talk and witnessed the unfortunate incident of Bryan going down. But my question to you is, the information I've been given is that it was too hot for them to go in to see what happened to Bryan, and I've discussed this with you offline, what our opinions are, and I suppose we'll never come to a definitive answer. But
well, actually, I got quite involved. The daughter of the father, I guess, Barry's sister. I mean, Brian's sister, contacted me to see what I could find out. I just interviewed Sig Muller, and he was the wingman on the day that Bryan was shot down. So I got his point of view, and then through you, I got hold of Stranek. I think his first name is Barry.
yeah,
Had a chat to him, and mainly between them, I'm nobody else is trying to stitch the bits together. Siggy said he saw Bryan go down into haze, very heavy haze, and he just disappeared. And then he said there was a massive ball of flame, which he thought was a strike on a fuel tank or whatever on this Frelimo column. But then when I spoke to Barry Stranek, he was right there where the plane crashed. He said it actually flew over his head. It was silent. It just made a whooshing noise. There was no sound of a blue note or engine or anything, and it just plowed into the ground. I said, well, did you hear any fire coming from Frelimo? Was it shot down? No, there was no fire at all. So the flames must have been the plane bursting into flames. But then why did he crash? And we've mulled around this, and the conclusion, with Siggy being a pilot and Barry having witnessed it, is that he either got target fixation or the engine failed. But if the engine failed, he could have ejected. So if you cancel one thing after another, it came down to target fixation. But the fact that the plane, Barry said it was just silence. All you could hear is air going through the wind vanes. There was no engine noise at all. So it's a bit of a mystery. But if you had to put a final sort of tab on it, it would probably be target fixation. But I'm not an expert. I'm only telling you what I learned from those two guys.
Yeah, because unfortunately, Bryan's dad in particular, just he's got his theories, but he actually mentioned to me, because I've been communicating through his daughter Shirley to him and that, and he's come up with his theories that plane was Timex and it sat in the hangar for 6 months. And I said, well, I got a few friends actually from my same intake living here in Brisbane. One guy I could walk to, and my brother-in-law, well, I could also walk to his house. He's still in Brisbane, but I asked him, his name's Mark Webb. He was an electrician on one Squadron, and I said, well, there's no way known. There was a hunter sitting there for 6 months. Without, I would have known that. No. And he's adamant that the plane wasn't Timex. But my question was, I was told that the area was too hot for anybody to go and have a look what happened. But what interested me through it all, I don't know if maybe Barry or yourself could answer the question. If I stand corrected, there was a Canberra shot down the same day? Or?
Yes, Rob Pinky. Is it Pinky? Yeah, Pinky was shot down in Canberra with what's his mate Straden? I'm a bit rough on that one. Yeah. But yes, I think that was shot down with the Quad 23 anti-aircraft guns. Yeah.
Putting yourself on the other side of it, like from the insurgents' point of view, they would have been copping some serious flack. Like, you would have suspected that they would have vacated the area. So that's just one question. Obviously, there's an answer, but
it was actually a very heavily armed Frelimo column that I think was coming to respond to the events of the day. And I think Bryan went in there to slow it down or try and stop it. He didn't come out, and nor did Kevin Pinky. That's it. That's his first name. I actually went to school with him. I believe he was trying to coax the Canberra back to Salisbury, but ploughed in on the way. So he tried to save the aircraft.
Yeah, I remember that day, like walking through the hangar, and Bryan didn't come back, and we just felt like it was. That was the only aircraft that I was in, like on a squad. Never came back. So just sort of felt.
There is one theory that maybe if the engine did fail, he was trying to get it going and just lost sight of how close to the ground he was. That's another option. But Siggy seems to think target fixation, but I don't know. Nobody will ever know, really, I suppose.
Yeah, anyway, back to one squadron. Where was I? Yeah, I remember seeing a big hole through, I think it was the port wing of a Hunter, about the size of a football, and you got this, what they call an aileron control rod that goes through to operate the aileron, which is the flap on the end of the wing to make the plane turn and that. And if the aileron control, the rod that goes through, I don't know if you can see, if my fingers was nothing, the gap was the only part of the aileron still operating the flap. So, a trillionth of a second, that plane wouldn't have come back. And then Ziggy might know more about it than me, but I forget what the pilot's name was. But he'd gone into a low dive, and he must have pulled out too long, and he hit these trees. And they got a pitot head, which is the airspeed indicator on the left wing, and it actually bent it like right around back. So he had no indication of what airspeed he was doing. So to land at that, you had to get two hunters the guy who knew what airspeed he was doing, so he could land it. Yeah, and just at this point, I'll just mention I put in a few photos. I think the one of the gun pack and the one inside the Hunter, the cockpit. I just got those off the internet, so I thought maybe some of the viewers would like to see what it looked like in a Hunter aircraft, but whether that was from the Rhodesian Air Force or not. But I can distinctly remember those where you put your feet, how the paint had worn off, and you got the yellow and the black. I don't know why, that just stuck in my memory. And then, oh yeah, the one day I was doing a pre-flight, and the aircraft, I think it got back pretty late, and part of the afterflight, whoever done the afterflight had missed some significant damage in the engine. And part of the role was when you marshal the aircraft in, you'd have to look, as an engine tech, you'd have to look down the intake, and as the compressor blade slowed down, that you could actually see right down there and try and pick if there was any damage to the the first stage of the compressor blades. And I noticed that there was some little chips in there. Anyway, so I crawled down the intake, and you're looking for loose rivets, or was there any damage? And you could get your finger through and turn the compressor, and yeah, definitely some damage. So I crawled my way out and went around to look at the jet pipe, and it was all what we call alley flash. So something had gone down there, but luckily that pilot got back too. So
this brings to mind spares. Were they really available, or did you guys really have to strip aircraft to keep the others going?
Yeah, there was like a mezzanine, how do you pronounce it? Floor up in ERS. Which, as an apprentice, you'd have to go up there, and there was a whole lot of spares. So you try and, that was part of a first year apprentice's job, try and salvage parts and put them in order and that. But there was, I don't know if I read about it. I think it was Rich Palmer, and I forget who else. I don't even know if it was on one of your episodes, but they actually flew them with false passports to, I don't know where it was, and they actually undercover. So that was pretty brave to go into another country.
Yes, they stripped parts at night while the guards were looking the other way. Yeah.
Yeah, and then somehow got them. So that was I think it was Jack Mullock.
Yeah.
Who used, he had what was it, the DC-7 or something. So he was actually quite involved in, helping us out with, moving stuff around and that kind of stuff. So whether he's involved in that, I can't remember. But yeah, so then that sort of was coming towards the end of the war. My dad had then decided, he'd had enough, and he left the police force. And I actually signed on for, I think, another year. I think they paid us $1,000. I don't know if you remember, which was an awful lot of money in those days to sign for another year. But at that stage, Rake, I forget his surname, he was the flight sergeant, had left. I'm talking guys in my trades and engines. And then Neil, I think his name was Neil Wagner, either Don or Neil, there was two brothers there. He'd left, Bones had left. So there was just Warrant Officer Trikoshi, who sat in the office, and then next in line was engines was me. And I thought, I'm still green behind the ears. And I remember one day I had to go, and part of one of the jobs you had to do was ground run the aircraft and do a few tests and that. So in the Air Force, we weren't allowed to taxi the aircraft. We always had to tow them or push them. And we had this. I was like an automatic tractor with had this long yellow tow bar. It had like a spring mechanism in it, so you couldn't like give any sudden force to the hunter. And we'd have two guys doing what we call tip clearances on your wingtips, and so make sure you didn't hit anything. Anyway, I'm tying outside the hangar. Now you can imagine my history of hitting a camera. I'm still, a bit apprehensive about this. And I just got outside the hangar, and the spring in this tow bar just starts taking up, and I was, my heart just sank. I thought, what have I done? Don't tell me I've hit something. I've got two guys doing your tip clearances, and what had happened, I don't know if it was a stormwater drain or something under the bitumen had let go, and the aircraft started sinking. I thought, I was relieved. Anyway, I carried on, towed it out, and we'd have to go near the runway, and there was this like a big earth wall, and you'd tow the aircraft out and then disconnect the tractor and that, and you'd put the two main wheels on two. They were yellow chocks, but on the chocks there was these like rubber mats, so that was mechanically fixed to the chocks. So the weight of the aircraft was on the rubber mats, and the chocks were in front of the wheels. Now, part of the ground run procedure, what you had to do, and don't quote me on these figures, but I think I'm right, you'd have to do what we call a slam acceleration, which was from idle to 7,800 RPM, and it had to time it, and it took 11 seconds. So I was in the aircraft, had the brakes on full, on the chocks, give it the slam acceleration, and the tacho starts going up. And at 6,800 RPM, you can see in one of those photos, there's these what they call bleed valves on the side of the compressor case. And what happens is at low RPM, the compressor's too efficient, so they bleed air off. And then at 6,800 RPM, it's like these gates, they just shut. So all the air goes through the compressor. Now, this is like hitting the turbo or power band on a two-stroke. The whole aircraft just goes like this. Anyway, like I'm expecting that, and you just hear this noise. I'll go like this, and the aircraft's going move forward like this, and it starts going down towards this big sandbank. So I don't even know I don't know if anyone else ever experienced that, but I got a bit of a fright. Like I'm no pilot. So, yeah.
In a plane, I know most commercial planes you push both pedals to act as brakes. Would you have done that in that situation to get the brake reactivated, or how does the brake work?
From memory, I think it was on your joystick, the brakes. From memory, but it's 50 years ago now. I'm pretty sure, and I know what you're talking. Like I worked in Civvy Street, and we were actually allowed to, like the small piston engine aircraft, we used to just drive out to where you do your ground run. But that I only worked on piston aircraft in Civvy Street, so. Yeah, so that's pretty much my story.
You seem to progress quite quickly from a guy that was an absolute novice to doing fairly responsible things. Were you allocated a shadow, somebody who followed you? Like, let's say you wanted to refuel a hunter or something. You can't just go along and plop off the nozzle and shove it in there. Did you have somebody hovering around you to help you and show you what to do?
Well, everything had to be like co-signed from memory. There was like this, like I don't know, like I actually forget what it was called, but like a log that you'd have to fill out, and then it would be co-signed. But from memory, I think like the menial things of just like checking oil levels and pre-flight and after flight. We were just obviously trained to do it and then let go. But if there was any major repairs, like obviously somebody senior to you would double check your work and make sure it was right. But I mean, one of the biggest fears was if you dropped a spanner and you couldn't find it, or dropped anything in an aircraft, well, that's AOG, aircraft on ground, and like that's a major problem. And I can remember like you'd tie a piece of string around your hand and like around the spanner, because sometimes you're just trying to get your arm through a little hole, and you look up there and try and remember what you have to do, and then when you get your hand there, you can't sort of see what you're doing. But yeah, it was a lovely time of my life, and I feel blessed to have sort of had the experience. But yeah, I suppose all good things come to an end. And then sorry.
No, carry on, Bryan.
Towards the end of the war, sort of this is a little bit out of sync too, but one of my mates, Jeremy Bull, was shot down in a Viscount. He was actually, I went to school with him, and his mum and dad were actually missionaries of a church I used to go to. But Yeah, that was pretty sad. And why I'm bringing that up is Julie and I, my wife and I, decided when we decided to immigrate to Australia, we had a bit of money. Remember, you could only leave with, I think it was $1,000 or something.
That's
so
right.
had a
Yes.
bit left over.
Yeah.
And I think we were lucky because I had a pension. We were allowed to leave with a bit more. But we decided to go to Wanky, Vic Falls, Kariba. Anyway, we were at I don't know what they called it, but the New Serum Airport there, the main runway, Air Rod, or I don't know, what do you call it these days, Harare National Airport.
Oh, yeah.
But we were all sitting on the aircraft and just about ready to go. And old Josh Nkomo walks on the plane. He sits right up the back. And he was a very large gentleman. And I think from memory, they had to lift up the part of the seat so he could fit in there. Anyway, and then the next minute on the radio comes, there's a technical issue. We won't be taken off at the moment. You can all disembark if you like. So, I thought had some sort of knowledge of aircraft. I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, Josh Nkomo and his entourage all hop off the plane, and I sort of scurried on after them, having a look, and I think there was a Mercedes waiting outside for him, and he was gone. They told us now, a little while later, we can get back on the aircraft, and Josh Nkomo didn't come back on the aircraft. Now, with the history,
it's funny that he couldn't fit in a seat, but he could fit through a toilet window on that SAS. That's what makes me laugh.
Yeah.
I have a little funny story with Josh Nkomo. I was at Holiday Inn in Bulawayo, and I was sitting there with a girl, and he was over there with a couple of guys, and they ordered prawns, but these prawns hadn't been shelled, and they came along, and he sort of looked at them, and the other guys looked at these things, and I'm sure they'd eaten prawns before, but anyway, he stuffed the whole thing in his mouth, spines and all, and I just watched him going with the spine sticking out, and you could almost see him looking at the other guys saying, what the hell is this these whiteys are eating, It was really funny.
Yeah, so we were obviously a bit anxious if we were going to make it. What do you do in that situation? But luckily you could feel the mood lighten as the closer and closer we got to Bulawayo. The people started talking, thinking, "Oh yeah, we're going to make it." And
did they think they were going to get blown up or something? Or?
Well, you don't know what you think. I mean, 2 Viscounts have been shot down as a south turn. Third time like what? I don't know, but
that was obviously during the settlement process, was it?
Yeah. After that would have been 81, I'd say.
I'm amazed he got on a commercial flight.
Yeah.
So, can you remember the names of any pilots that you guys that you saw around the various stations? Any of them stand out to you?
Oh, mainly just Ziggy and Baldy, Bryan Gordon. But sort of, sorry, Prop Golden.
Prop Golden House, Prop, was it? Prop? Or he might have been a bit old for you guys, I don't know.
I just have I think if you're more in an operational, like in the front line, you actually, because of what you were going through with each other, I mean, the rank sort of structure, I would have assumed would have sort of just not been as prevalent as it was. But for us, it was just business, and you got to put yourself in those pilot shoes. Like, we knew who they were, but they would have been fully focused and obviously very, very apprehensive. So pretty much we just used to, and as security, they wouldn't have let us know like where they were going or anything. We were just told, get the aircraft ready, make sure it's armed, and we just climb up the that red ladder after he had done, help them strap him in and marshal him out, and just hope and pray he comes back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then after the war, I suppose we all just, one of my wife's very best friends, Michelle Walters, Dave, I don't know if he was in RLI, Dave Walters, I can't remember, but he was a regular in the thing, but he was then farming, and I think that would have been 81, 82. So they actually murdered Dave, Michelle's brother, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. They were just going down to do the mail run, and Michelle was at home, and she heard the gunfire, and the Africans who were working in with them, they wouldn't let her go out, and apparently she fell through the window and cut herself. But I suppose we all sort of went through,
When was that, during the war or shortly after?
No, after the war. That was
in the Bulawayo area?
Yeah, in Bulawayo, 81, 82.
Yeah, the Kukurundi, yeah.
Yeah, so
sure.
You just think guys like lived through the whole war, and now it's you would have thought peacetime, and murdered little kids, and Anyway, I also put there in one of those photos, Hosea, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it, Chipengano's Hero Day message. I don't know if you want to put that up and people can read it for themselves. And
yeah, certainly will.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much my story. And Willem de Beer, I don't know if you want to edit this out, but I forget what rank he was in the army, but as I said in the earlier part of the discussion, he was had left the army and become a game ranger, and that's where I met him at Thule. And funny story, as I said, you can edit this out if you want, but I'd actually, when I'd left the Air Force, I went to work for RUAC before we left to come to Australia. And my dad was pretty good friends with him. And this guy's 6 foot high and 6 foot wide, and I don't think he liked me. Anyway, his wife Hazel, she's a little pommy lady. I don't even think she was 5 foot, and Mr. Beer was 6 foot something. And anyway, her lawnmower broken down, and I said to Mrs. De Beer, "Oh, I'll take it to work, and I'll see if I can fix it for you." And she said, "Oh, that's lovely, thank you, Bryan." But I used to ride a motorbike to work, so I had to borrow a little VW Beetle. Anyway, I put it in a VW Beetle, and I'm bombing along from Rua, I think the area where they called off to the RUAC, and I'd come down this ravine and up the other side, and I wasn't doing anything wrong, and I just hear this, what's going on here? Oh, Mr. De Beer is going to kill me, man. Anyway, I open the door and have a look underneath, and there's just water going everywhere, and I'm thinking, this is air-cooled. VW's air-cooled, man. Where's all this water coming from? So I had a better look, and there's a battery. It's dangling on the cables. And I don't know if you know, but a VW Beetle, the battery used to be under the back seat. I opened the back seat, and the whole floor's rusted out. I walked to the nearest farm and I rang into Mrs. De Beer. Oh, Hazel was her name. But in those days, you always used to respect your elders and call them Mr. and Mrs. She says, "Oh, I'll send Willem to come and pick you up." And he used to love doing up the old Series 2 Land Rovers. And, eventually he gets there and tows me back. Anyway, at that time, I'd walk back and I'm looking and I'm thinking, this battery looks brand new, man. Do you think there's no dust, no corrosion, nothing? Anyway, he gets there and I'm looking, and he says, I said to him, "It looks like a new battery, Mr. De Beer. What idiot would have put this battery in there? Like, you can see the floor's rusted out." Anyway, that night I'm having dinner with Mrs. De Beer, and I tell her the story, and she says, "Willem just put that battery in there." So I don't know how he didn't kill me, but after that we sort of became mates. I used to help him a bit. He used to love doing up his Series 2 Land Rovers, and that was a bit of a hobby for him.
So where did you meet your wife? I don't know if you mentioned that, or if you did, I didn't hear it.
Yeah, she actually was born in Australia, and then her parents moved around a lot, and we met in Bulawayo, the youth group, and through a friend of mine, and we just sort of hit it off, and we ended up getting married in Bulawayo, and then I think it was late 81 or 82. We sort of, we've had enough now, so decided to move to Australia. Like, I was happy to stay, and if it was still what we believed we were fighting for, carry on with it. But I remember, I think it was Whiteman, I went to in one squadron, tell him that I'm leaving, and he said to me, "No, I still want to fly these things. Don't want you to leave, because I was the only engines guy left there now, other than Warrant of Trikoshi. So, but no, I just couldn't feel motivated, Tony. Like, it's just
yeah, it lost cause at that point. So
yeah.
essentially, you served mainly in Hunters and Canberras. Did you and helicopters or Trojans or any other type of aircraft?
No, I did. The only piston engine aircraft I worked on, well, a little bit, and that was only in the early days, was Dakotas, and I think a little bit on an Islander, but the predominantly on like the Avon 207 engines at ERS, and then on one squadron, I think I spent the bulk of my time. So, but
so,
as I said,
sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I was just, like a sponge, trying to soak up as much as you could. Like, I think the reality is you'd spend, theory's one thing, but practical's, so different.
So what did you do in Ruak? I used to see them taking tourists around at Vic Falls Airport. What did you do?
Yeah, I worked at Ruak for a year. Mr. B, we used to call him Mr. Becker. He was the boss there. Dave Jenke, I think his name was. He was ex-Air Force. Yeah, just worked on light aircraft, little Cessnas, and I think we had one turboprop there. And I forget, there was another two guys there, and instruments. And we actually worked on Piper Super Cub. There was two. And actually, I think in one of your episodes, there was a photo of one of them. Now, they were a fabric-covered wing. And I remember, I had to pull the engine out and check all the cables. And I think I had to make all new, like, side panels. And, but there again, because mainly my experience was gas turbines, then to sort of go back to piston engines. But, the practical is so much different to theory, so...
And what was your day-to-day job? Tuning the engines up or maintaining them?
Oh, just occasionally you take an engine out or do compression tests or make HT leads. The spark plug leads. Oh no, sorry, it was hydraulic hoses. There was a machine there we could make hydraulic hoses. And as I said earlier, in you could do ground runs, but at Ruak at any rate, we were allowed to actually drive the aircraft out. So I thought that was pretty fun, and occasionally go up on a test flight. And I remember there was this one, I think it was a French pilot. He actually changed our mind because Julie and I were booked in to come to Brisbane, and he said, "Oh no, you just go to Perth." Anyway, we got to Perth and there was nothing happening there, and I said, "Oh no, your best Sydney or Melbourne." But we ended up in Melbourne because my wife's got a lot of relatives there to help us out of it because she didn't have much money. But and then ended up in the motor industry and worked in that for about 30 years, and then ended up running a sheet metal factory for 15 years, and then I did a few odd things, but I'm retired now. Every day is a Saturday.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, trying to find out things to do. This is one of them.
We also blessed to have all the work that you guys have done. I mean, I've just learned so much, and I'm really grateful to have learned, because we were all just in I don't know, but I was just in my own little bubble, in my own little world. The only knowledge you'd hear of other people was maybe a relative or something you'd heard, but or what some of these guys is just obviously very inspiring. What some of the guys who've done some of the talks on your episodes have done, just totally superhuman.
I agree with you, Brian. It's really opened my eyes, and the guys that have fascinated me more and more, the internal affair guys. They were the backbone of the country out in the rural areas, keeping law and order running. Yeah, we came in and slotted the bad guys when some were found, but the day-to-day administration of running the whole country and keeping the supply of cattle going for export and that type of stuff, which they did even come from the rural areas, was a hell of a task. I really take my hat off to them.
What was fascinating for me too, and part of a lot of joy or excitement for me, is when I hear somebody like George Bushney, who I knew very well, and his brothers, the Naughty Twins, and Floyd Parker and Ziggy, and the guy. I'll just hang on a minute. Joe, what was the guy you worked with in cabs? Oh, I can't remember his name. He did a talk. Must have been about a year or two ago. He got blinded, and he worked with my wife. I can't remember his name now. anyway, became a computer programmer at
Oh.
Cabs in Salisbury. And he was lucky to survive, and he actually got blinded. And now to become a computer programmer, Russ Franklin.
Okay.
Yeah, he did, a couple of years ago, he did a talk. I don't know if it was on yours or Hannes's or John's, or I don't know. But I remember yelling out to my wife when I saw the guy doing the interview, "Hey, Darl, I think this is the guy you used to work with." And my wife used to bring him to Cabs in Salisbury there every day. And to become a computer programmer with eyesight, let alone being blind. But my wife actually, through all this, has contacted him. He's now living in New Zealand, and she phoned him the other day. And he's done very well. I think he set up a business writing programs for people. And
amazing. Hey, crumbs, man. Last question. Just based on the way you talk, you're a Christian?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So I got, I think it was must have been about 14 or 15 when I used to go to Bulawayo Baptist Church. And one lady once told me, I'd rather live my life believing I hope I get this right. I'd rather live my life believing there is a God and find out there isn't, than live my life believing there isn't and find out there is. So
yeah, the difference between the two is a lot of heat.
Yeah.
A lot of heat. Yeah, praise the Lord for that. Yeah.
That's a funny one.
Yeah. You've got, at the end of your life, you've got 2 lift buttons. One goes up, one goes down.
That's correct.
I'm aiming for the top one.
Yeah.
Bryan, it's been a good talk, and thank you for coming on board. A lot of people are reluctant to do it.
Yeah, I found it. I've been pretty anxious about it because obviously the bar's been set pretty high from some of the, when you hear I nearly every day have a look. I wonder if Tony's done another talk, and I love listening. Yeah.
The aim of this program is not to compare people at all, and it's to record our history because books are written, but maybe books lost. Hopefully, these videos will be kept as in remembrance for a long time to come. Yeah. And it's very, because the spoken word coming right out of a guy's mouth or a girl's mouth, lady's mouth, is a lot more powerful to me than reading a book.
My brother-in-law Colin Van Furen, who's also in engines, he's just gone sort of on a bit of a world trip, and they just had a reunion in Cape Town from some of the Air Force guys. Anyway, he contacted I can't remember his name now. He sent me one of the pilots who knew Bryan Gordon very well. So I've actually asked my brother Colin to see if this pilot will do a talk on one of your episodes as well. So whether he will or not, I don't know. But
that'll be lovely. Thank you very much. And this is not aimed at you, Bryan, but generally for the audience. John finally got his passport in South Africa. John Van Sale, who owns this channel, had to change his air ticket a few times, which has cost him a lot of money. But he's leaving to go back to the Philippines tomorrow. So if any of you are Patreon supporters or feel you can just put a couple of dollars into the pocket for him, that would be wonderful. So, Bryan, thanks very much. I think we're going to end it there.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care, my friend. God bless you. Bye-bye.